The views and opinions expressed on this program are those of the participants and do not reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
BronxNet. Your voice, your views, your vision.
Good evening and welcome to a special one-hour edition of Bronx Talk, the debate for the Democratic primary in the 13th Congressional District, which is a district that has been reordered to now include the Bronx communities of Van Cortlandt Village, Kingsbridge, Kingsbridge Heights, Bedford Park, and University Heights. Tonight's debate is being presented in conjunction with the Riverdale Press and the Norwood News, and also we have a small studio audience with us tonight, which we don't always do. We will not be taking phone calls, but you can email questions or comments to us at bronxtalk@hotmail.com, and we'll forward them as necessary and or read them on the air during a future edition of our program. Our email address is bronxtalk@hotmail.com. A couple of other notes before we get started. You will notice when you see the full set, we have a new set here in the BronxNet studios. It was custom designed for Bronx Talk by BronxNet's Gene Elton, and it was based on an original mural by Bronx artist Daniel Hauben. We thank them for their excellent work, and you'll see much more of that set as we go along. We've invited all 5 of the candidates who are running in this election, but unfortunately only 4 of them have accepted our invitation, and one of them, in fact, is tardy, and he will, we assume, get here very shortly. The incumbent, Charles Rangel, who will be represented by an empty chair here in the studio, sent along his apologies with this statement. Congressman Rangel regrets that he is unable to accept your invitation due to a previous engagement. He's been working hard to get to know the residents of the Bronx and is disappointed that he is unable to attend. He remains eager to meet them and looks forward to representing the people of his new district. Well, we appreciate Mr. Rangel's stated concern about the Bronx, and we also sincerely appreciate his busy schedule, but editorially, we cannot condone his absence tonight, especially since Bronx communities are being added to this district for the first time. We believe it's his responsibility to participate in this televised forum so the people of the Bronx can make a fully informed choice among all of those who seek to represent them. We reject his excuses and apologies. In plain language, he should be here. In any case, we focus now on the candidates who thought enough of the program and the people of the Bronx to join us. And so from left to right, it is Mr. Clyde Williams. Thank you for joining us, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Ms. Joyce Johnson, thank you for joining us.
Absolutely.
Mr. Craig Schley, thank you.
Thank
and
you.
I mentioned that Mr. Espaillat had not been here yet, but he has just arrived. State Senator Adriano Espaillat, thank you, sir, for joining us
so much.
on tonight's very, very important forum. Here are the rules for tonight's debate, which you all received last week via email, so you are aware of them. We'll inform our studio audience as well as our on-air audience. Questions will be directed to an individual candidate. That candidate will have 60 seconds to respond. It will be followed by a moderated debate of up to 3 to 4 minutes between all the candidates. The candidate to whom the question was asked will have the last word. Candidates are asked to be brief and to the point to allow for maximum participation by all. At the end, time will be set aside for audience-submitted questions, so our studio audience will get a chance to submit some questions, and those will be selected by the editorial staffs of the Riverdale Press and Norwood News. And then also we will allow each candidate for a 60-second final statement, which will be given in the same order as the original questioning. So I assume you all understand the rules. I know you've been at other forums in this race, which I think is a wonderful thing, certainly for the democratic process, and so we appreciate your joining us tonight. And so let us get right to it. The first question will be directed to Mr. Williams. Mr. Williams, you failed to mention the Bronx on your website. How can Bronx voters trust that you have their best interests in mind and understand their issues if it wasn't even important enough to put on your website?
First of all, let me say good evening and thank you for inviting me to participate in this forum tonight. The Bronx is extremely important to this congressional district and the way it's been shaped. The Bronx is important to me. I know historically people have felt that this is an area of the city that has been overlooked. And they don't feel like they get the resources they deserve in order to be more competitive in an economic sense and more competitive from the position of educational opportunities and other things as the rest of New York City. The oversight on my part, one, I apologize for, but also when the site was put up, originally the district hadn't been redrawn. But more importantly, it's not about whether or not I've included it on my site now. For a fact, the bottom line is this: I want to make certain that the Bronx is represented well. I don't have the historical legacy of other people who've represented either other parts of Manhattan or other parts of the congressional district. I don't have the legacy of knowing that I actually would pick one group of people over the other. From my vantage point, I want to represent every single person in this congressional district. I want to make certain that not one group is more important than the other group. I want to make certain I have the opportunity as a congressional member to bring resources to Bronx as I would to any other part of this congressional district. And the bottom line is this: the Bronx is no different from the rest of the congressional district. You look at the fact that still in this congressional district, we have unemployment that's twice the national average. You look in this congressional district, African American, Latino men, unemployment is above 20-some-odd%. Same thing with teenage unemployment. Once again, it's twice the national average. You look at healthcare disparities in this congressional district. Once again, the Bronx is no different than other parts of the congressional district. We have these same challenges. And the same thing with educational disparities. And these are the kind of things as a congressional member that I would like to emphasize and work on to change for the community overall.
Okay, other candidates want to respond or add something to that question?
No.
Mr. Schley, you wanted to say something?
Well, the question was, why did he not have mentioned the Bronx? I would say, first of all, hello to you. Thank you for allowing me to be here. It's an honor to actually run to represent the Bronx. I would say simply this, that the Bronx is no different than any other part of the community, and that they need two essential things. And this is what I'm going to resonate throughout this debate here. Housing that they actually can afford, to present legislation to HUD to make sure that it now begins to target the income in this district in order to develop housing. Second, to make sure that you can afford to do business with our small businesses in this area that would help spawn employment in that district. These are the two things that are important to our community, no matter where you are in the Bronx or in Manhattan area.
Okay, Mr. Espaillat.
I actually want to welcome these voices to this debate. I think that it is important that they're here. I don't think the oversight was a major issue, but let me say what I think is egregious. First of all, there was an attempt to knock these candidates off the ballot so they wouldn't be part of this discourse. And then, of course, there's this empty chair. That's egregious. A simple mistake in a district that wasn't drawn, I don't think it speaks to the candidate's desire to address the issues in the Bronx. So I welcome the voices that are here today, all the candidates that are here. I think they have a lot to contribute, and I look forward to continuing to discuss the issues that are relevant in this district.
Thank you very much. Ms. Johnson, the next question is for you. You endorsed Mayor Bloomberg for re-election, yet in his third term in particular, he has rankled many in the Bronx. What has he done to improve the Bronx to justify that support that you gave him?
Nothing. Absolutely nothing. The endorsement was a mistake. I have to say that I have, never missed a vote, and I've always voted. And I had high hopes for the mayor on two fronts. Education, because education is a passion for me. I was executive assistant to Schools Chancellor Rudy Crew, and I was hopeful that the mayor would bring new leadership to education, reform that's much needed, change the lives of our kids in terms of teaching and learning. He spoke a good game and did not deliver. Secondly, his policies on stop and frisk. Stop and frisk under his watch are, I think, are egregious. They defy our civil rights, our civil liberties, and more than that, you know, the numbers don't speak to any change in terms of security, in terms of getting guns off the street. And in fact, we have a community now that's hunkered down, and we have young men, mostly Black and Latin, who see themselves as not a product of a community that feels that they are uplifted and that they have the opportunity to soar, but they are under siege, humiliated, and so on those 2 points alone, the mayor has failed, and I'm extremely disappointed. Would never do it again.
Others want to respond, Mr.
Yeah,
Schley?
well, I will make before I respond, I have to make a factual clarification. No candidate was challenged except for me. I am the only candidate running for the 13th Congressional District that was challenged by Charles Rangel's camp with the Board of Elections, lost there, and he sued me in Supreme Court. So where this other challenge to other candidates came from, I don't know, but I'm the only one there. So I just
think
wanted
it's probably
to
general challenges to everybody,
well,
which they all do, but you're quite right.
There's
you're
a
quite
difference.
right.
Yes,
there
no
is quite
such thing
there's
as
a big difference. Yeah.
general challenge. There's either you're going to actually challenge or not. So I just want to make that clarification.
Okay. Anybody want to respond to the question about Mayor Bloomberg?
I would say that,
Yes.
that Bloomberg's rezoning proposals that have displaced over 100,000 people in our district and in the Bronx is something that that's really egregious. The fact that we haven't had no protections from our representatives in these rezoning proposals. I sued the city on behalf of 71 businesses and residents, seniors, and vets homes in and around the rezoning of 125th Street, where they wanted to build 25 to 30-story high-rises. I defended them in court and the appeals court for 3.5 years. These are things that are bringing what we know now as runaway development, that are displacing our communities. They're moving north, and I want to make sure that after this election, I come to the Bronx and defend their right to be able to stay there and have the housing that they can afford.
Anybody else? Okay, Mr. Schley, you began your political career canvassing for Freddie Ferrer's mayoral campaign, yet
Yes,
he's
sir.
come out in this race to support the incumbent. He's come out to support Mr. Espaillat. I want to be clear about that. Doesn't that say a lot to Bronxites that despite your support for him, one of their own came out for your opponent?
Well, I think that speaks to something about me. It's not a matter of my own. I'm coming into this race to represent people, human beings. I don't care who you're talking about. Freddie at the time was the best candidate I saw to do the job today. And if things were changed, I would have done something different. But the issue is not Hispanic or black. The issue is, how do we make this district work the way it is moving forward? And I know that I'm the best candidate for the job because everyone in this district needs a place to live and be able to do business there.
Anybody else? Sure.
I would like to say that I'm very proud of Fernando Ferrer's endorsement, and also Adolfo Carrion. They both were great borough presidents of the Bronx. They helped rebuild this borough. They made it one of America's finest city. It really brought the Bronx back from ashes, and I'm very proud to have the support of Fernando Ferrer, who's a fine New Yorker. He serves us well now in the MTA, but he led this borough for many years. He brought it back from a very dark time. And Adolfo Carrion, who was also a borough president here, who was later hired by President Obama, has also endorsed my candidacy, and I'm very proud to have both of their endorsements.
I believe endorsements are great. There's nothing to take away from anybody who's endorsed either Senator Espaillat or Congressman Rangel. But the only endorsement that really matters are the voters. Those are the people at the end of the day who have the ability to actually elect one of us to represent them. That is the most important endorsement we can have. I have people supporting me across this congressional district, be they Latino, African American, be they white. They're doing so on a grassroots level. As a matter of fact, one of the people who was supporting me in East Harlem, unfortunately, she died. Her name's Yolanda Sanchez. She passed today. But the bottom line is that we need to figure out as a community What are the things that are most important to us? What are the issues that are most important to us? And hopefully if we talk about issues, they will resonate with people. And when they resonate with people, people will understand you should pick the person who best can represent you, regardless of them being black, white, or Latino. I think that's the most important thing. People want you to figure out how it is you're going to help them improve their lives. That is the most important thing at the end of the day. And this job is about representing people in Washington, D.C. And I'm the only person sitting on this stage who's actually worked in Washington, D.C. I'm the only person sitting on this stage that's actually worked for 2 sitting Democratic presidents. I'm the only person sitting on this stage who has worked as the Deputy Chief of Staff at the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which has oversight responsibility for the WIC program, food stamp program, and the National School Lunch Program that actually feeds more people than any other program every single day in America.
Thank you very much. Ms. Johnson, did you want to say something?
Sure. I'm just happy, you know, endorsements notwithstanding, and I concur that the final endorsement will be the endorsement of the people of the 13th Congressional. And that I think this represents what I'm happy to see with all 4 candidates here, and missing one, is that this is a more open process than I've seen in many, many years. I think the first competitive race that the congressman ran in was 2010. I came in 3rd of 6 and got the New York Times endorsement. And I certainly hope to, and that was the vote of the people on little or no finances. And so I'm glad to see that there's a contest. I'm sorry that the congressman is not here. And we should continue the debate because I'm speaking to the folks of the 13th Congressional.
Well, as someone who has worked real hard to put on this debate for the people of the Bronx, along with the Riverdale Press and Norwood News, I certainly agree with the notion that the open forum is a very important thing, certainly for our oftentimes neglected borough of the Bronx. Mr. Espaillat, for you, this has come up already a couple of times in the dialogue, but let's focus on it. How important is ethnicity in this campaign? As someone with experience in the State Assembly and Senate, you've been running on being the first Dominican to be elected to Congress, or potentially to be elected to Congress, instead of your record. Doesn't that appeal to the voters' worst, not best instincts?
Well, I don't think that I'm running as a Dominican candidate per se, although I am of Dominican background. I am very proud of the service that I have given to the entire community, both as an assembly member for 14 years and a sitting senator for 2 years. I happen to represent the district now, the 31st Senatorial District, which is very diverse. In fact, it is not a majority Latino district. In fact, I represent the areas of Riverdale and the West Side. And I have made some inroads in bringing about change. We fought last year to ensure that rent stabilization was restored, not for one group or one particular neighborhood, but for over 1 million New Yorkers. That was restored. And the rent laws were strengthened. And in fact, I thought that we should have more. And I pressed Governor Cuomo to ensure that we put together a tenant protection unit, not to represent one tenant that's white or black or Latino or Dominican or Puerto Rican, but all tenants that often face unscrupulous landlords that are trying to push them out. So I think my record speaks for itself. I was the chair of the Black, Hispanic, and Asian Caucus in Albany. I helped heal wounds, divisions that lasted for over a decade. I was the first Latino elected to chair that body in 22 years since the late Angelo Del Toro. And we were able to bridge rifts and divisions that have been impairing that group from getting things done. So I'm very proud of having a big tent approach to politics. And I do think that every community is entitled to his Jackie Robinson moment. But even Jackie Robinson, when he was on the field and he was being called nasty names, it was really when Pee Wee Reese put his arm around him in the dugout that everybody felt that this was a moment for everybody, not just for African Americans in baseball, but for all Americans, that we must have an avenue of openness and access for everyone, regardless of their race, ethnicity, or religion.
Anybody else want to respond?
Well,
Ms. Johnson first. Then
sure,
Mr.
thank you.
Williams.
Absolutely.
I couldn't agree more. I think ethnicity is important. My father was the first black elected to Common Council, a public office in the Hudson Valley back in the 60s, when there was certainly a wave of folks wanting political empowerment for African Americans in historic districts where it had been represented by whites. But once again, at the end of the day, it is going to be a measure of what one can do for the larger community. And I have to say that, as we talk about, I must say that 53% of this district, in terms of voting population and all, are made up of women. And so I hope it doesn't fall on anybody's blind eye that I am a woman, and as the Jackie Robinson moment, I would like to see a Shirley Chisholm moment once again, on BOT and on BOSS for this district. Thank you.
Mr. Williams?
Well, this congressional district has been a majority Latino congressional district for a while. Charlie Rangel, when he's won time and time again, has always put a coalition of people together, be they African American, be they Latino, be they white. But where I think we are today is this. As I said earlier, people have to make a decision who do they think is the best person to represent them, not based on ethnicity, but based on their ability to actually deliver what is important to the congressional district. And I believe that I'm the best person to do that. And I do believe that the politics of old, where you've had these political machines that have really done everything to try to make it difficult for new people to run, try to make it difficult for people to become more involved in the process, and actually have really become an incumbency protection program, have been the vehicles that have really pushed the agenda where you've tried to draw these districts that are gerrymandered for specific people. And that's not what this congressional race is about, and I don't think that's what New York City is about.
Mr. Slay?
My Jackie Robinson moment came this week when two people down the street from my office ran into my office and begged me to intercede in HUD throwing them out of their home, illegally displacing them. We stopped the process, and they actually had the cops actually help them move the furniture back in and make HUD go through the process. That's my Jackie Robinson moment. And if we're talking about a legacy, my great-grandfather, Luke Grady, is North Carolina's first African-American state legislator after slavery. Public service runs deep in me. I'm a former fireman and NYU honors student. The point that I'm trying to make here, if we're talking about going to Congress and we're talking about actually representing this district in the most broadest way, I'm the only one on this panel that has been cross-endorsed by multiple lines. That has not happened since Charles Rangel used to be effective, especially when he ran against Alma Clayton Powell. So I'm saying at the end of the day, it's the people needing a digression from the status quo. That makes the Jackie Robinson moment.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, let's talk a little bit about federal issues. This is, after all, a federal position. We're back to you, Mr. Williams. President Obama bailed out the banks, and yet unemployment is still rampant, especially here in the borough of the Bronx. Mm-hmm. Did he make a mistake? Should he have not done it? Some say he should have gone even farther. What do you think?
I think the president did what he thought was in the best interest of actually shoring up our overall economy. But what I think is more important is that we figure out how it is we create jobs for people who live in this congressional district. And there is money that the president has allocated at the Labor Department. There's money sitting at the Upper Manhattan Empowerment Zone. There's money that's been put between an agreement between Columbia University and the actual Upper Manhattan community that we can actually use to do the kind of job training that's important to put people to work today. If the unemployment rate could be less than 7%, if people will train to fill all the jobs that were available today. To give you an example, we import nurses now from Bangkok, Thailand, and the Philippines. We can train people in our own congressional districts for those jobs with the money that I'm talking about. The same thing for electricians, the same thing for auto mechanics, the same thing for plumbers. These are good paying jobs to give people the ability to take care of themselves and their families. And those are the kind of things that we need to be looking at in order to bring about real employment opportunity for people in this congressional district.
Banks bailout, Mr. Espaillat?
In the middle of the Great Depression, Franklin D. Roosevelt did two great things. One of them was to create a great public works program to put people back to work. The other one was that he instituted the minimum wage in the middle of a depression to bring money to the pockets of shoppers and consumers. You know, we must train young people in particular, and this borough has one of the highest unemployment rates in the entire state. And it's not something to brag about. I very often see elected officials almost brag about the level of poverty and unemployment that exists in this borough. I think we need to fight very hard to change that. And we must train young people in jobs for tomorrow so that when they're ready to go and find work, there's jobs available for them. But I think it's critical that small businesses rebound, that in fact they are the biggest employers across the nation. And very often these small businesses, the small mom and pop stores, pay over the minimum wage because they get a good employer that almost becomes part of their family and knows the business and is honest with them. And they pay $10 an hour. So let's increase the minimum wage nationally. It's time to take a look at increasing the minimum wage nationally. Let's bring money into the pockets of shoppers.
Ms. Johnson?
All that is really good, but if by some failure of the electorate to continue the status quo in terms of the composition of the House and our Senate, not much is going to be done because the Congress is broken, it is paralyzed, and if the president is reelected, which I am confident that he will be, it will still be the same broken Congress. And so not until the Tea Partyites are gone, not until Republicans then change their tune, and I think they will as the American people start to demand that we get results. So my point of this is, there's a Washington piece, but if the composition is the same, nothing will get done. It will be paralyzed, although I will work across the aisle until such time as the party lines are changed. But the larger part of the work of this district and this job, I still feel, is here in community, in the 13th Congressional District, where one has to have a footprint, where one has to know people, where one has to engage whole community, because there's much we can do despite what is happening in Washington, and I think that's a larger part of the job.
Mr. Slay?
The problem with the bailout is it started and ended with the most influential and financially stable community in our country. There would be no problem if they actually honored their promise to Congress and the president to make sure that bailout money reached the hamlets. That's the issue. So at this point in time, I'm looking at our children are too important to fail. We need actual money in our public education. Its budget is $153 billion. That's almost too close to the bottom investment in our country. If we were to properly invest in the small businesses, it would also spawn the support that our immigrants here need to take them from labor to citizenship. We start doing commerce with our natural immigrants and their natural communities, and then we actually can grow our economy, very similar to Paul Krugman said. We need immediate short-term investment in small businesses to actually employ the people in our residential communities, which is actually responsible for 70% of our employment.
Right. Candidates, we've reached the halfway point in our debate. What we'll do is, did you want to conclude since you were asked the question?
Yes, I'd love to conclude.
So let's take the break and then we'll come back and we'll start with your conclusion and then we'll proceed.
Thank you.
Thank you, and you're watching a special debate on BronxTalk. This is the 13th Congressional District debate, co-sponsored with the Norwood News and Riverdale Press. We'll take a short break and we'll be right back.
Yeah, this is power, the power of our voice, the power to transform, the power to leave our mark, the power of my vote.
Register and vote. Call 866-VOTE-NYC or visit www.bronxnet.org.
You're watching a special edition of BronxTalk. Tonight it's the Democratic primary in the 13th Congressional District, and we have a candidates debate that is being produced and presented in conjunction with the Riverdale Press and Norwood News. And of course, BronxNet has done an unbelievable job at putting this program together tonight. And we want to thank Michael Maxnabi and also Marcelo Mendez for their great work in leading this production this evening. We were talking about the bank bailout, and according to our rules, Mr. Williams can have the last word. So let's conclude with that, and then we'll get to the next question.
Well, the thing that I think was unfortunate as we were having this conversation is this. Republicans on Capitol Hill, you look at Eric Cantor, you look at Paul Ryan, you look at people in the Tea Party, they actually want to balance the budget, the federal budget, on the back of poor people and working class people. That is unacceptable. They have become so intrusive in reference to the way they view government. The fact of the matter is they want to decimate Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, all the things that have been safeguards for generations for people. They also want to go against anything that the president actually introduced. But what we need to do is find out where is some common grounds where I think we can work together. And one of the ways I think we can figure that out is in the following areas. For a fact, we know that they are amenable to looking at pre-K, funding that, which I think is extremely important to a congressional district like this. The other thing I think we need to look at, Mitt Romney has already said that he agrees with President Obama that we should fully fund Pell Grants, which send people to school, and we're sitting right here at a gorgeous college, and also make certain that student loans don't double by July. So those are the things where we can work on today with Republicans where we have common ground.
Thank you very much. Let's continue the talk about bipartisanship or partisanship and the value of it. Ms. Johnson, this is for you. This whole idea of, you talked about reaching across the aisle and working with Republicans. But in this day and age where party differences are so stark, and some of the candidates have already mentioned it, wouldn't you be best off, and wouldn't Bronx constituents appreciate your sticking to your values and traditional Democratic Party values rather than watered down important issues with the kind of compromise that has happened in Washington?
That walking across the aisle or meeting across the aisle does not say that I don't get what I want. That's a willingness to do that. And here's my history. I started out some umpteen years ago, my first job as a first-line supervisor, the first woman in management for what is a blue-collar production plant in Seagram. I was not welcomed as a woman. I was told that you should be home with your child and you're taking a job away from a man. And so my bottom line in terms of productivity was to get those cases out the door. So I convinced, and relationships, it's about relationships. Yes, I got those cases out the door to the point of being, promoted 4 times in 5 years. The rose to be director of equal employment opportunity for Seagram, working across the aisles with people who did not agree with me, who did not even like me. But the point of this was that we all had an obligation, labor and management, white, black, male, female, to get the job done. That was my common ground. That was my bottom line, and that's what I brought people to.
Okay, Mr. Espaillat.
We must take back Congress. I am a Democrat. I believe in the Democratic Party. I believe in the principles of the Democratic Party. I'm a progressive Democrat, and we need to take back the House of Representatives. I think President Obama understands that fully now. I think he was a gentleman, and he tried to lead the country in a bipartisan fashion. And the result is that he had to water down his Health Care Reform Act. He couldn't pass the DREAM Act. There's been an assault on women's rights. There's been an assault on labor unions. We're going backwards. We need to take back the House of Representatives. I will be an unashamed Democrat that will fight for progressive values. We need to fix Congress. The president needs to know that he has a group of maverick, bold voices around him that will push this agenda that he presented to the American people 4 years ago. The agenda that President Obama presented to the American people 4 years ago gave them hope and opportunity. And he was forced to step back because Democrats compromised that agenda. I'm willing to go into Congress and fight with Obama to make sure that we bring it back to the table, that we pass comprehensive immigration reform, that we give the young people the DREAM Act, that we go back and work on health care reform and make sure that we get the full gamut of it, that women's rights are not assaulted. Democratic progressive values.
Look, we'll give everybody a chance.
I respond to that.
Okay, go ahead. And then Mr. Williams will go after that.
We're actually speaking to what a representative does. I'm certain everyone on here can tout their experience or their knowledge and et cetera. But what Obama needs is someone that if you're asking to go persuade the other side to work with you to pass a bill, that they're not bringing in baggage. They're not bringing in old style of doing things, that you could prove that you're coming from a district that you already consolidated the interests of the leading parties. I'm a Democrat, always have been. My position is much more liberal than any person on this stage and in this race. But I also have demonstrated that I can convince the conservatives, the liberals, and otherwise to support this on a very basic fundamental reason, of a democratic reason. It's the right thing to do. That's what you need in Congress.
Mr. Williams?
I believe that everything that Senator Espaillat laid out as far as the ideas of what it is we represent as Democrats are correct. But the reality is we have to figure out how to get those things done in a Republican-controlled Congress. It is my hope and my desire that Democrats take the House back. But the reality is I think that's a slim chance. So we have to figure out what it is we can realistically do. And part of the reason why the president got his health care bill passed the way he got it passed is he didn't have a choice in the matter. I'm sure everybody, all Democrats, would have wanted a single-payer part of that bill to be passed. But he had to get something passed. And the most important thing is that we actually have real health care legislation. We have legislation that provides people the opportunity to keep their kids on their policy till the age of 26. Does not allow insurance companies to discriminate anymore because of pre-existing conditions, nor can they set a cap on the amount of money that's being paid out. That's a big deal, and we cannot lose track of that. And we have to figure out how it is we still push our agenda even if we don't control the House.
Ms. Johnson, you have the last word.
As being a field director, because, I was the state field director for the president here in New York, where we garnered 40% of the vote. So June 26th, I win the primary. I'll rest today. I'll thank my constituents for having the confidence. Thereafter, until November 6th, I will go around this country to be one of the major drum beaters for the president, because I do believe if more of us were to do this, more of our Democrats were to go around and put our necks on the line in hostile territory and talk about the issues that matter to the American people, I believe that we can and must take back the Congress. That will be my job, not only here, but in support of the president's, because we must do it.
Mr. Slay, the next question for you. You mentioned education earlier. Many educators are supporting a Dump Arnie Duncan movement in protest of the president's educational policies, specifically the emphasis on testing. Would you join in a movement like that, or are you satisfied with education under President Obama?
Well, the movement I want to join is the one that actually brought me to the point of running for office. My district, we realized, one, that we take 2 years at a time. Congress is supposed to reflect the people's will of the here and now. Right now, their focus, as far as education is concerned, is to separate the facilities of charter schools and public schools. They should have separate facilities, invested in separately, and not compromise the environment that our children are being learned in. Second, they want bona fide investment in public education as it used to be. These are the things that I'm focusing on. I'm narrowing my scope because we could easily be pulled and distracted, but I'm going in there to make sure I deliver on that promise.
Others, Mr.
Espaillat? I think there are issues with, serious issues with No Child Left Behind and with Race to the Top. But I think the critical question that has been put forward by many parents, and at the end of the day, no one worries or cares more for the academic growth of their children than the parents. It's whether or not high-stake testing is a formula that really assesses the aptitude of the student. And it's a real debate out there that must be addressed. I think that there needs to be innovative models developed to replace high-stake testing. I think a child that's pounded and pounded and pounded on to pass the exam may not necessarily be learning the way he should with the analytical reasoning and the other aptitudes that he needs to develop to be successful in college and in the real world. So we must reassess that. There is portfolio-based assessment is one model that could be looked at. There are other models that are very innovative and interesting, but I think to go down the road of high-stake testing, where a child is just pounded and pounded on and not asked why, but what, is a real problem. And I think that's what the parents are addressing right now.
Ms. Johnson.
Yes, I don't know if the comparison between No Child Left Behind and the Race to the Top is quite accurate in terms of the high state testing. For sure, No Child Left Behind was a single, a bullet. You either hit that mark or you don't. I think the president, there's nothing wrong with standards. There's nothing wrong with standards in our education, and part of the standards would be, certainly a test score. But like the senator said, it was, absolutely the portfolio of learning. But more than that, in 1971, we were number 1 in the world in terms of our educational system. We are now number 26. And so we have to, in addition to all this said, we have to extend the day and extend the year so that we can be competitive in the global society and actually win the global marketplace, as we always have.
Great, thank you. Sir?
First, leave No Child Behind. A state can opt out of that now. And the mayor, particularly in New York City, the mayor has mayoral control of schools. He has the greatest impact on our school system by far. I do believe that some of the things the president has done and Arnie Duncan done have moved the country in the right way on education. I believe that where we are right now, we need to try as many different things as possible. I agree with Senator Espaillat that we shouldn't teach to a test, but the bottom line is our school systems today are failing our children. So we need to look at all the various options I think we can bring to the table to bring about real education reform in America.
Thank you. You have the last word, sir, if you want it.
I do not agree with testing being a hallmark in the standard. Our children, and you know it, if you have 2 different children in your home, and I grew up in a very big family, we learned at different rates. We had different types of thought process. Some think in sequence, some think linear. This does not speak to the needs of our children. Our children need a very nurturing environment. We need one-on-one support. We need more pre-K to develop their minds intellectually and philosophically. And we need an environment, actually friendly environment for our children to grow. And to hone them only on testing would be limiting their ability to think and express themselves analytically in a very scientific world that we live in.
Thank you very much. Mr. Espaillat, many who supported President Obama in 2008 were disappointed ultimately with his compromise on health care. Did he compromise too much? And if you're in Congress, what would you suggest to keep the ball rolling on health care reform?
Absolutely. I think that he was pushed to the precipice, and he had to compromise on many important things, although there are very important provisions in the health care bill that I think are very important and they should be kept. The Supreme Court is looking at all of this right now. If the Supreme Court has their way, they could eliminate potentially the entire law, so that we need to go back to the drawing board. I think the president needs bold voices in Congress that will support his vision that he presented to the American people 4 years ago. I remember when President Obama got elected, the level of enthusiasm of hope and opportunity that was there, that somehow it has wither away a little bit. And he has been pushed by the Tea Party radicals that were able to take control of the House of Representatives, that are driving a hard, radical, right-wing agenda. And he's been pushed to water down his proposal. We should continue to support the president's proposal, the original proposals. I submit that we should go back to the drawing board, that even if the Supreme Court does not change this, that we should go back and try to adopt some of the provisions that he originally presented to the American people that would allow for families to have access to health care across the United States. And particularly small businesses. Small businesses right now, most of them do not offer a health care plan for their employees. And that makes them, there's no competition for them. Many people take on a job because it has a health care component to them. We must assist small businesses in that endeavor as well.
Others?
Yeah, let me just say this.
Mr. Williams, sure.
It's a big deal what President Obama got passed in Congress with health care. I don't care if it doesn't have single payer or not. It is a very big deal what he got done. We cannot sell that short. People need to understand this has transformed health coverage in America as we know it. The 3 things I just laid out in particular earlier that I talked about, from no longer being able to discriminate, not putting a cap on pre-existing payments, and also your kids being on your policy. But also part of that health care bill talked about the fact we need to set up community clinics. One of the things we see right now, too many people in poor communities use emergency rooms as their primary care physicians. That's become extremely expensive. The way now that the payments for Medicare and Medicaid are going to take place, which will mean that for a lot of hospitals, they will not be able to bill the government over and over again for that person coming in continuously. And so we need to figure out how it is we make certain that the things that are already enacted we realize are important, and hope that the Supreme Court does not gut the bill in a way where we don't have that coverage anymore.
Ms. Johnson, yes.
You know, in a political world, I hope that we, the people, as we talk about with the president, and you're quite right, he did a yeoman's job, the Congress did a yeoman's job in getting that bill passed. But in 2010 midterm elections, we lost the Congress, we lost the House, and just barely, maintained a Senate. Too many of our Democrats and independents gave up on the president and what he was able to accomplish, so we didn't see the forest for the trees. And here we, with that vote, staying home or not voting, we have the Congress that we have now. So we, the people, have to take ownership of that effectively short-circuited and stopped an agenda that was absolutely at hope, an agenda that would have been much further along, pushed the needle. And the health care plan that was passed, while it may not have been the perfect one for all, because it's never perfect, it is incremental, and we moved a long way, and now it is in jeopardy in the Supreme Court, and yes, we may have to go back to the drawing board and start all over again.
Sir?
Very proud of our president, very proud of the leadership, very proud of him moving the health care package. However, the promise to my district was that we would put a single payer option on the table. It was taken off for whatever reason, I understand. However, if we have to go back to Congress and renegotiate this, we should also look at the advantages of actually having it. If we had a public option there, this would take an enormous amount of burden off of the small businesses. We can make up the revenue in the employment that small business will be able to increase, because not having the burden of the single payer. And I will say that our district only makes, on an average, $16,000 to $28,000. They can't afford the premiums of the private health care plans. It has to be there.
Did you want to conclude?
I want to finalize. Yes. There is no question that Democrats failed President Obama in his first year. They failed him on the Health Care Reform Act. They failed him on immigration reform. We had a golden opportunity on the first year when we had the majority in the House of Representatives and in the Senate to get things done, things that the American people yearned for many, many years, historical pieces of legislation. And many of the Democrats backed down and did not support President Obama. That's why we need new, bold voices in Congress that will be unashamedly Democrats, that will try to fight to bring the majority back to the House of Representatives. And yes, I believe we can take back the majority. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to fold my hands and say that is impossible. Absolutely not. We could take it back, and we can give President Obama the support that he needs to make sure that he completes the agenda that he presented to the American people.
Candidates, this will be the final question before we go to final comments, and it goes to you, Mr. Williams. What role do you think Congress should take on the issue of marriage equality? Should it take a role in the issue of marriage equality?
First of all, I believe that anyone who wants to get married should have the right to be married. Most of those decisions, as of right now, have been made by the states. And I believe for where we are right now, it has not come up as a profound issue with the federal government. But if it does, I'd be in support of it.
Okay. Others? Marriage equality?
I believe it is a states' rights issue, and as the civil rights issue back going 40, 50 years ago was supposedly a states' rights issue, and not till it became an overwhelmingly, social mandate that the country move in a different way, that the federal government did step in and enacted many of our civil rights laws. So if that's the measure that must be done, I would support that. As of this moment, I thought the president was bold, a profile in courage. I issued the same day that he did a statement in support of his profile in courage. And I think that's what we need more in our government. Profiles in courage from leadership that takes the country to a different place than it is currently and moves the agenda for human rights and dignity for all.
Thank you, Mr. Espaillat.
Yes, I am very proud to have cast a vote in support of marriage equality in New York State, a historic vote. I think that it is a civil rights issue. I think that any time someone cannot have succession rights to their lease because of who they love, that's a civil rights issue. Anytime someone cannot visit someone, a dear person in their heart, to the hospital.
Does it belong in a debate in Congress?
Oh, absolutely,
was the original
absolutely.
question.
It deserves a national, vigorous debate. No question about it.
You'll have to be quick, and then we're going to conclude. You can weigh in on it if you'd like.
Simply put, it's not an issue in New York City. That's where we're ahead of the game. I believe just as a woman should have a right to do what she wants with her body, I believe an individual who they love and what they worship is between that person and their God. And if someone wants to marry, then they should be allowed to do so. But if the issue is, will the president put it on the table? It's talked about. I think he will. Then we'll be able to debate it on that.
Candidates, we've reached the point in our program where we're going to permit a 1-minute closing statement from each of you. By prior agreement, we'll start with Mr. Williams. You have 60 seconds, sir.
First of all, thank you again for having me here tonight. I greatly appreciate it, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk to the people of the Bronx. This race is about the future, it's not about the past. And if you are concerned about your future, I hope you will support me. As I said earlier, I am the only person who is running to represent this district who's actually worked in Washington, D.C. I'm the only person who's running who actually has worked for President Obama and President Clinton. I'm the only person who's running who's actually worked at a major government agency, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which has oversight for the WIC program, the food stamp program, and I'm the only person who's running for this actual seat, other than Charlie Rangel, who has the relationships in D.C. that are important to bringing about real change in this community. I hope that you will support me, and I hope that you vote on June 26th.
Thank you very much, Mr. Williams. Ms. Johnson, it's to you.
Thank you as well, the residents of the Bronx. It is my honor to have sat here tonight, and I do indeed ask for your vote. Congress is broken in Washington, and Congress is broken here in the district. Congress is broken in Washington with the 435 people that debate and banker, and Congress is broken for the 800,000 folks that represent the 13th Congressional District. I have the management, organization, leadership, and personal skills to work to bring all of our communities together, to work across the aisle in Washington, D.C. to get major legislation passed. It really is about the person who has a history of results. Results are the face of change. That has been my history. That's where it will continue to be. And I want to build a legacy of accomplishment and service around that. I ask for your vote June 26, 2012.
Thank you very much.
Please vote.
Mr. Schley.
To the 13th Congressional District, the Bronx, all of us. My name is Craig Schley, and on June 26, we have an historical opportunity to really make a difference. You know what you want. You want someone by your bedside when you really need them that's going to make sure your bedpan is changed, your back is scratched, that the doctors do what they're supposed to do. Someone that's going to fight for what you want right here in this district. And I know what they want, and I've been fighting for it. I've been fighting to make sure you have ability to have targeted income housing. It's a federal act that HUD is supposed to produce homes that you can afford. Secondly, that we want to make sure that the escalating rent here is stopped, and I will put my efforts behind it to make sure that that happens. That we can afford to do business, and our small businesses are no longer displaced. And with me, when we move together on June 26, I will assure you in 2 years you will see results. If you hire me, give me that opportunity. Craig Schley for United States Congress.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Espaillat.
Thank you. I want to thank BronxNet for hosting this debate. This is an important debate. We must have vigorous debates on the issues that are pertinent and relevant to our communities. I want to welcome all the constituents in this Bronx neighborhood to visit my campaign office over at 80 Kingsbridge Road, just a few blocks from this college, and to become engaged in what I think will be a candidacy for fundamental change. Much has changed since 1970 when the incumbent was elected. And I must address the empty chair.
15 seconds, sir.
You know, much has changed, and then this neighborhood is fundamentally different. It has new challenges. I think I am the representative that will hold the feet to the fire of the rest of the Congress. I will bring about change for the neighborhoods of this Bronx area that is important to have represented in Washington. Thank you so much.
We really appreciate your participation tonight, all four of the candidates. Thank you for holding a high-level discourse and a respectable debate. It isn't always the case on this program, but we really had a wonderful program tonight, and I want to thank each and every one of you, and I'll certainly encourage all our Bronx viewers to go out and vote on June 26th. Now, if you do have further comments or questions on anything you heard on tonight's show or anything going on in the Bronx, then email them to us at bronxtalk@hotmail.com, and we'll read those on the air during a future program or forward them to the people who need to see them. Archives of the show are available at bronxnet.org. You click Bronx Talk on the right-hand navigation bar. Also, please become a fan of us, of Bronx Talk on Facebook. Next Monday night, another very special show. Recently, I took a tour with my camera of the South Bronx areas where Fresh Direct will be located. We'll show you the photos and talk with some of the community activists. Should be a very interesting show. Bronx Talk Monday nights at 9 here on BronxNet, Cablevision 67, Verizon Fios 33. Thanks, of course, to our great producer, Jane Filoro, director Michael Arias, to BronxNet, as I mentioned, Michael Max and Marcelo, and, of course, to the Riverdale Press and Norwood News for their support of tonight's program. And to you, good night. Stay there, don't get up.
This is power, the power of our voice, the power to transform, the power to leave our mark, the power of my vote.
Register and vote. Call 866-VOTE-NYC or visit www.bronxnet.org.
These things we count on every day started as ideas. Ideas from the minds of African Americans. Support minority education today so we don't miss out on the next big idea tomorrow. The United Negro College Fund. A mind is a terrible thing to waste.
Big dreams and good grades aren't enough to get into college. There are actual steps you need to take. Finding someone who can help is the first and most important. For the next steps, go to knowhowtogo.org.